I planned a surprise engagement celebration for my boyfriend's birthday with his entire family there. When I stood up to announce our future together in front of everyone he loved, Mason looked at me like I had just humiliated him. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Are you serious? You ruined my birthday with your agenda." I closed the ring box, slipped it back into my pocket, and replied, "You're right, my mistake." Then I thanked his family for coming and walked away. My name is Clara Whitmore. I was 32 years old when I learned that a person can spend years talking about a future with you, only to punish you the moment you try to make that future real. Mason and I had been together for 4 years. When I think back now, I can still remember the first time we met. It was one of those backyard barbecues neither of us actually wanted to attend. We ended up standing near the drinks table making sarcastic comments about the terrible music. By the end of the evening, we'd exchanged numbers. Everything after that felt easy. Mason was the kind of man who paid attention. He remembered small details. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He had a way of making people feel important without looking like he was trying. Within 18 months, we were living together. Marriage wasn't some distant fantasy we avoided discussing. It came up naturally all the time, during grocery runs, while folding laundry, on long drives when conversation drifted toward the future. In fact, looking back, Mason brought it up more often than I did. He sent me screenshots of rings. He joked about wedding venues. Once, while we were having dinner with his sister, he laughed and said, "I'm just waiting for Clara to stop overthinking and realize I'm not going anywhere." Everyone laughed, including me. At the time, it felt romantic. What I didn't understand then was that Mason loved the idea of commitment as long as he remained in control of how the story unfolded. His 30th birthday was approaching, and for months he kept talking about wanting it to feel meaningful. Not another generic dinner, not another crowded bar, not another evening that people forgot a week later. "I want something memorable," he told me one night. I took that seriously, maybe too seriously. I spent nearly 3 months planning everything. I rented a rooftop event space overlooking the city skyline. It wasn't the most expensive venue in town, but it was beautiful. String lights stretched above the seating area. Glass railings overlooked the city. White candles sat on every table. At sunset, the entire place glowed. His mother helped me choose the location. His sister helped coordinate the guest list. His grandmother cried when I told her what I was planning. "Oh, sweetheart," she told me over the phone. "He's going to remember this forever." I believed that too. I hired a photographer, ordered a custom cake, paid for catering, arranged music, and then there was the ring. Not an engagement ring for a proposal. Mason had already given me that ring weeks earlier during a quiet weekend getaway. This ring was different, a custom platinum anniversary style band I planned to present during the celebration as a symbol of the future we'd already agreed to build together. It cost me $14,500. 2 years of savings disappeared the moment I bought it. Not because Mason demanded expensive gifts. He never did. But he cared about symbolism. He liked gestures that carried weight. He liked moments that felt significant. I wanted this moment to be significant. The plan seemed perfect. Mason believed he was attending a small birthday dinner with his parents and sister. Instead, the elevator doors would open to a rooftop filled with everyone he loved. We'd celebrate for an hour, enjoy dinner, share stories, and then I'd publicly announce our engagement and surprise him with the celebration I had spent months planning. Simple, meaningful, personal. At least that was how it looked in my head. The night itself started exactly the way I'd imagined. Mason was in an incredible mood. He wore the navy suit I loved and spent the drive teasing me about turning 30. "I still look 26, right?" he asked. "27 if the lighting is generous." He laughed and squeezed my hand. That memory stayed with me later, because an hour after that, the same man would stand in front of me acting as if I had betrayed him. When the elevator opened onto the rooftop, everyone shouted, "Surprise!" His reaction was exactly what I had hoped for. He looked genuinely surprised, genuinely happy, and within seconds he was surrounded by laughing relatives, camera flashes, and raised champagne glasses. He looked genuinely surprised, genuinely happy, and within seconds he was surrounded by laughing relatives, camera flashes, and raised champagne glasses. Standing near the entrance, I watched him move through the crowd and felt relief wash over me. In that moment, every late-night phone call, every secret text, and every stressful detail felt worth it. For the next hour, everything went exactly according to plan. Then the photographer caught my eye. It was time. My heart started pounding. I picked up my glass and tapped it gently with a fork. The room gradually quieted. Mason turned toward me, smiling. He looked relaxed and completely unaware of what I was about to reveal. I gave a short speech. I talked about the barbecue where we met, our first apartment, the terrible heater that broke every winter, the countless ordinary moments that had slowly become my favorite memories. By the time I finished, his mother was already crying. His grandmother was holding a napkin to her face. His best friend had his phone raised, recording everything. Then I looked directly at Mason. You once told me you wanted a moment worth remembering. A few people laughed softly. Mason smiled. I reached into my pocket. The room seemed to stop breathing as I opened the ring box. I looked at Mason and smiled. A few weeks ago, you asked me to spend the rest of my life with you. Several guests gasped. His mother immediately covered her mouth. His grandmother already looked close to tears. I lifted the ring. And tonight, surrounded by the people we love most, I wanted to celebrate the future we've chosen together. I smiled. To our engagement. To our future. Instead of excitement, an uneasy silence spread across the rooftop. His smile disappeared. At first, I thought he was overwhelmed. Then I watched something change in his expression. The warmth disappeared from his face, replaced by irritation I had never expected to see. He looked around the rooftop at the guests, the photographer, the cameras, and then back at me. Are you serious right now? A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd before dying almost instantly. I stayed frozen in place, the ring box still open in my hand. What? His jaw tightened. You did this tonight? I blinked. Tonight? On my birthday. My stomach dropped. Mason. Hank cut me off. You hijacked my birthday for your agenda. The rooftop fell completely silent. Not a single person moved. I tightened my grip around the open ring box. Across the room, I saw confusion spreading across faces one by one. His mother looked stunned. His sister looked horrified. Even his grandmother seemed unable to process what she was hearing. Mason, I said carefully, I thought you'd be happy. He laughed once. It wasn't a pleasant sound. You thought this was a good idea? You said you wanted something meaningful. I wanted a birthday, he snapped, not some public performance. A murmur moved through the crowd. The photographer lowered her camera. His mother finally spoke. Mason. I ignored her. This whole night was supposed to be about me. That sentence hit harder than anything else, because suddenly dozens of little memories started connecting. Every time he complained about not getting enough recognition. Every time he became irritated when attention shifted elsewhere. Every time someone else's feelings became secondary to his own. Looking back, all the little moments I'd brushed aside suddenly made sense. You think celebrating our engagement makes this about me? I asked. Yes, he answered immediately, as though the question had never required a second thought. Something inside me became very still. I looked around the rooftop. I looked around at the decorations, the flowers, the cake, and the family members who had helped me plan every detail. Months of effort had somehow become proof of selfishness in Mason's mind. That was the moment everything changed. I closed the ring box. The click echoed louder than it should have. What are you doing? He asked. I slipped the ring back into my pocket. Then I nodded. You're right. His expression shifted. What? You're right, I repeated. I shouldn't have turned your birthday into an engagement celebration. The confusion on his face deepened. I looked toward the guests. Thank you all for coming, I said quietly. I'm sorry for the confusion. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. His grandmother started crying. His mother covered her mouth. No one knew what to say. I turned and walked away. Clara. I kept walking. Clara, wait. This time there was panic in his voice. I didn't stop. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside. Just before they closed, I glanced back once. Mason was standing in the center of the rooftop, surrounded by people, surrounded by attention. Yet somehow he looked more lost than anyone else there. The doors closed, and for the first time all night, I was alone. The ride down from the rooftop felt longer than it actually was. I stood alone inside the elevator, staring at my reflection in the mirrored wall. My makeup was still perfect. My hair was still in place. From the outside, I looked like a woman leaving a successful party. Inside, it felt like someone had taken a hammer to the future I'd been building for 4 years. By the time I reached the hotel lobby, my phone was already vibrating. My phone kept vibrating with messages, missed calls, and notifications, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I didn't check any of them. I wasn't ready to hear explanations, especially not from the man who had just humiliated me in front of 30 people. Outside, the night air hit my face like cold water. I crossed the parking lot, climbed into my car, and sat there without starting the engine. Only then did my hands begin shaking. What stayed with me was the irritation in his eyes and the absolute certainty that I had somehow wronged him. That expression followed me all the way home. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself back on that rooftop, hearing the same words over and over. You ruined my birthday. You ruined my birthday. You ruined my birthday. Around 6 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep and reached for my phone. 52 unread messages. 19 missed calls. Most were from Mason. A few were from his sister Emily. One was from his father. Several came from friends who had witnessed the disaster firsthand. I scrolled through the previews. Please call me. Can we talk? This isn't what you think. Most of the messages were variations of the same request, a chance to explain. What I didn't see very often was sorry. A few hours later, Mason's mother called. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. Hello? There was a pause. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded strained. Clara, I don't even know where to begin. I leaned back against the headboard. You don't have to say anything. Yes, I do. Her answer came immediately. What happened last night was unacceptable. The words shouldn't have mattered as much as they did, but hearing someone acknowledge reality felt strangely comforting. For the first time since leaving the rooftop, I felt my shoulders relax slightly. His mother sighed. His father and I barely slept. I didn't sleep either. I imagine not. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Then she quietly added, he's devastated. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded absurd. I was the one who had spent months planning the celebration. I was the one who had been humiliated in front of everyone. Yet somehow Mason had become the injured party in his own version of events. He's been crying all night, she continued. Then she hesitated. I wants to talk to you. I already knew what he wanted. Not to apologize, but to explain, justify, and somehow make sense of what he had done. Anything except fully own what happened. I figured he would. Would you be willing to hear him out? I looked toward the window. The city outside looked gray and exhausted, just like I felt. I don't know. That was the most honest answer I could give, because despite everything, my feelings hadn't vanished overnight. 4 years don't disappear because of one terrible evening. I still loved Mason, or at least I loved the man I thought he was. The problem was that trust had cracked in a way I wasn't sure could be repaired. His mother remained quiet. Then she said something unexpected. You know, he was terrified you'd leave him. I frowned. What? I was terrified you'd leave him, she said. Even after he proposed, he kept worrying that something would go wrong. That caught me off guard. Nothing about Mason had ever suggested insecurity. Confidence seemed to pour out of him naturally. I was nervous? Very. I sat there processing that. Then another thought arrived. If he was so afraid of losing me, why would he do that? The silence that followed answered the question before she spoke. Clara? No, seriously. My voice wasn't angry, just confused. He could have said he wasn't ready. He could have asked to talk privately. He could have said almost anything. His mother exhaled slowly. I know. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I think Mason spends so much time thinking about how situations affect him that he sometimes forgets everyone else is living through the same moment. That sentence stayed with me after the call ended, because deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Around noon, I finally opened one of Mason's messages. The message went on for several screens. The kind of message someone writes, deletes, rewrites, and edits repeatedly before pressing send. I read it twice. The second time made things worse. He spent several paragraphs explaining the pressure, panic, embarrassment, and expectations he claimed had overwhelmed him that night. Paragraph after paragraph focused on his emotions, his experience, his discomfort. By the time I reached the end, I realized something. The message wasn't really an apology. It was a defense brief, a carefully organized explanation of why he had reacted the way he did. My feelings barely appeared in it, and when they did, they felt secondary, almost incidental. I put the phone down. Then I left it there. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange fog. I wandered through the apartment looking at things differently. The dining table where we'd discussed wedding plans. The couch where we'd spent entire weekends watching movies. The kitchen where we'd joked about our future children. Every room felt like evidence from a case that had already been decided. Late that night, another message arrived. This one was short, only one sentence. Please don't let one terrible night erase everything good between us. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked my phone. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about one terrible night. One terrible night had simply exposed something I could no longer ignore. 3 days later, I was staying at my friend Olivia's apartment when someone knocked on her door. Olivia looked through the peephole. Then she turned toward me. Mason. My stomach tightened. I hadn't told him where I was. Neither had Olivia. The knocking continued. Clara, please. We stayed silent. Clara, I know you're in there. I exchanged a look with Olivia. Then I suddenly understood. Location sharing. Months earlier, during a road trip, we'd turned it on and forgotten about it. In the chaos after the rooftop celebration, disabling it hadn't even crossed my mind. Now he was using it to find me. The realization made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't fully explain. Not because I thought he was dangerous, because it showed he still believed he had access to me, access to my time, my attention, my space. After several minutes, the knocking stopped. Eventually, his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Olivia closed the blinds and sat beside me. That wasn't romantic. No, it was weird. I nodded, because that was exactly the problem. Mason genuinely believed persistence proved love. He never seemed to understand that refusing to respect someone's boundaries usually proves the opposite. A few days later, Emily called. Unlike everyone else, she didn't try to convince me to reconcile. She simply asked how I was doing. Honestly? Always. I looked out the window. Some days I'm angry. And the others? Mostly confused. Emily laughed softly. Yeah, same. I blinked. You're confused too? Clara, I've known my brother my entire life. She paused. I thought I knew exactly how he'd react in that situation. And? I was wrong. That answer hit harder than I expected. Because if Emily was struggling to recognize him, maybe I wasn't crazy for feeling blindsided. Then her voice became more serious. There's something you should know. My stomach dropped. What? Mason's telling a different version of the story. My stomach dropped immediately. What kind of different version? Emily sighed. The kind where he's the victim. I closed my eyes. Part of me had expected exactly that. Still, hearing it out loud felt different. What exactly is he saying? He tells people you blindsided him. I laughed. A short, disbelieving laugh. His entire family helped plan it. I know. His mother picked the venue. I know. His grandmother knew. I know. Emily sounded exhausted. That's why nobody in the family understands why he's telling the story this way. I rubbed my forehead. The frustrating part wasn't that Mason was lying. It was that he seemed to believe his own version. According to him, the problem wasn't what he said on the rooftop. The problem was that I'd publicly celebrated our engagement at all. His reaction became understandable. My actions became selfish. The more Emily talked, the clearer it became that Mason wasn't trying to apologize for what happened. I was trying to rewrite it. Before hanging up, she said something that stuck with me. Moms talked to him. Dads talked to him. Even grandmas talked to him. Grandma? Emily gave a tired laugh. You know how much she loves him. Yeah, she told him he owed you a real apology. I couldn't help smiling slightly. How'd he take that? About as well as you'd expect. After the call ended, I sat quietly for a while. For days, I'd been wondering whether Mason truly understood how much he'd hurt me. Now I realized that wasn't the right question. He understood. He simply believed his hurt mattered more. For the first time, I understood this wasn't really about the rooftop. It was about a pattern I had ignored for years. A week later, reality finally forced its way into my life. I couldn't avoid the apartment forever. Most of my belongings were still there. Important documents, furniture, clothes, pieces of a life that needed to be divided. I chose a weekday afternoon because Mason was supposed to be at work. At least that was the plan. The apartment looked exactly the same when I unlocked the door. His coffee mug sat beside the sink. Our photos still hung on the walls. The blanket we always fought over during movie nights was still folded neatly on the couch. For a few seconds, it felt like nothing had changed. Then I remembered the rooftop, the silence, the humiliation, the expression on his face. Suddenly, the apartment didn't feel familiar anymore. It felt like a museum dedicated to a future that no longer existed. I packed quickly. Clothes, electronics, important paperwork, anything I couldn't risk leaving behind. About 40 minutes later, I heard a key in the lock. My heart sank. The door opened. Mason stepped inside. We both froze. Apparently, neither of us expected the other to be there. Clara. His voice softened immediately. I set a box down near the hallway. Hi. He stared at me for a second before taking a cautious step forward. I've been trying to reach you. I know. Can we talk? The desperation in his voice caught me off guard. Not because it changed anything. Because it reminded me how much easier this would have been if he'd simply acted like a villain. Villains are easy to leave. People you still care about are harder. What do you want to talk about? Us. He gestured around the apartment. Everything. I nodded. Okay. The relief on his face appeared almost instantly. Then he started talking. Within a minute, I realized we were having the same conversation we'd already had through text messages. He talked about pressure, panic, embarrassment, and how trapped he had felt standing there in front of everyone. Every explanation circled back to the same place. Everything in the message revolved around how the situation had affected him. Eventually, I interrupted. Mason. He stopped. What? I looked directly at him. What exactly are you apologizing for? The question caught him completely off guard. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he said, "For reacting badly." I waited. That was it. Reacting badly. Not humiliating me. Not dismissing our relationship. Not turning one of the most vulnerable moments of my life into a public embarrassment. Just reacting badly, as though his tone had been the issue, not his actions. I folded my arms. "And why did you react badly?" He frowned. "I told you." "No, you explained what you felt." I held his gaze. "You still haven't explained what happened to me." Silence. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller. "Mason, tell me what happened to me that night." I looked away. That answer told me more than words ever could. Not because he couldn't respond, because he'd never really considered the question. Eventually, he ran a hand through his hair. "So what are you saying?" I took a breath. "I'm saying this isn't a misunderstanding." His expression tightened. "This isn't a communication problem." I glanced around the apartment, at the photos, the furniture, the life we'd built together. Then I looked back at him. "When everything mattered most, your first instinct wasn't to protect us." His face fell. "It was to protect yourself." The silence that followed was painful, for both of us. I could see something shifting behind his eyes. A flicker of understanding, maybe even regret. But it arrived too late. Because even standing there, looking devastated, he still hadn't given me what I needed. The hardest part was realizing that I no longer trusted him. And without that trust, I couldn't imagine a future together. The conversation ended shortly after that. Before I left, Mason asked one final question. "Is there anything I can do?" I thought about it. 4 years is a long time. Long enough to make you search for reasons to stay. Long enough to remember every good moment while ignoring the bad ones. But the answer never changed. No. His face crumpled slightly. I hated seeing it. That was the difficult part. I still cared about him. I just couldn't build a future with him anymore. I picked up my box and headed toward the door. This time he didn't try to stop me. I think he finally understood what was happening. The conversation wasn't ending. The relationship was. The next few weeks were filled with practical decisions. The next few weeks disappeared into lease paperwork, utility transfers, and moving arrangements. Boring adult responsibilities that somehow feel enormous when a relationship collapses. The lease became our final shared problem. Mason couldn't afford the apartment alone. I didn't want to stay attached to it. For several days, we went back and forth trying to find a solution. Eventually, his father stepped in and helped negotiate a clean exit with the landlord. A week later, my name was officially removed from the lease. That chapter was over. Moving day arrived not long after. My brother helped load boxes into a rental truck. Mason wasn't there. Emily had convinced him that another emotional confrontation wouldn't help anyone. For once, he listened. As I carried the final box downstairs, I turned around for one last look. For years, I'd imagined leaving that apartment after a wedding. Maybe to buy a house. Maybe to start a family. Instead, I was leaving alone. Oddly enough, it didn't feel like failure. It felt like acceptance. By then, something else had started happening. The story Mason had been telling was falling apart. Not because I exposed him. I never posted online. I never attacked him publicly. The truth had too many witnesses. His mother knew. His sister knew. His grandmother knew. His friends knew. One of those friends still had the engagement celebration video. Soon enough, people saw exactly what happened. Not a manipulated version. Not a rewritten version. The real version. Over time, some people defended Mason. Others quietly distanced themselves. Most simply stopped arguing and accepted the facts. His family continued loving him, but they stopped excusing him. That distinction mattered. Months later, his mother called and told me he'd started therapy. I wasn't surprised. Neither was she. "He still struggles to understand why everything became so final," she admitted. From his perspective, the rooftop was one terrible mistake. From mine, it revealed something that had been hiding in plain sight for years. A month later, Emily called one last time. "Mason got a job offer." "Where?" "Colorado." I blinked. "We're in New York." "I know." Her voice softened. "I think he needs a fresh start." Maybe she was right. Too many memories lived here. Too many reminders. Too many people who remembered exactly what happened. "I hope things work out for him," I said. Emily was quiet. Then she asked, "Do you mean that?" "Yeah." And I did. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't hoping he'd fail. I simply didn't want to build my life around him anymore. That was all. After that call, we never spoke again. Months passed. Life slowly settled into something new. I moved into a small apartment of my own. Nothing fancy. Just peaceful. For the first time in years, every decision belonged entirely to me. The quiet felt strange at first. Then it felt comforting. I started therapy too. Not because I was broken. Because I wanted to understand why I'd ignored certain warning signs for so long. One afternoon, my therapist said something simple, Sometimes people reveal who they are when they don't get the reaction they expected. I thought about that for days. Maybe that was what happened on the rooftop. Maybe he expected admiration, control, or simply an evening that unfolded exactly the way he imagined. Whatever the reason, the outcome never changed. The engagement celebration collapsed. The relationship ended. The future I imagined disappeared. When I think back on that night, what stays with me isn't the celebration or the stunned faces around the rooftop. It's the moment I realized the man I planned to marry cared more about the spotlight than the future we were supposed to share. I closed the ring box, thanked everyone for coming, and walked away. That was the moment I stopped chasing validation from someone who couldn't give it and started trusting my own judgment instead.